Cool. And thank you, everybody. Good evening on this very hot Sunday evening of Memorial Day weekend, the official beginning of the summer season. And yet we're all not in our whites. We're in Zen black and muted, not quite. So this is the beginning of the summer season, though the solstice doesn't come until the 20th of June, when the Earth's pole has its maximum tilt toward the sun on that day. And, in what is our maximum tilt toward the Dharma life? That's kind of what we're always looking at. How do I turn directly and integrate these wonderful teachings to relieve myself and all those whose lives mind touches of difficulty and distress? Seasons run through our lives and mark our states of mind. Even in one day, we can go through a number of seasons. And certainly we have our relationship to Zen practice in a seasonal way. There are times when the juices are really flowing and our practice is really flowering. And other times when we hit the deep, dark winter and everything just stops. Our leaves fall off and it just looks as though nothing's going on. So I just thought I'd use this very handy image to reflect on some of the variability that runs through a long life of practice, because we're not always inspired. And we're not, and yet we can come back to it unexpectedly through all sorts of circumstances. So this morning, I was walking through a grassy field, and I noticed as I was I hadn't planned on thinking about the Dharma talk as I walked. I usually like to just be present in the cool morning air with the bird song and the rabbits and whatever else I meet along the way, snakes. But what I did notice was I drifted into noticing the variability along the most level, even ground. There was still variability. There were dips and rises, some fairly bare of vegetation, some thickly inhabited by various grasses, amazingly broad variety of grasses. I once decided I would count the number of different kinds of grasses that I saw as I walked along the path. And I just got distracted. I never did it, but there are many. And you probably have noticed the same thing. And then there are other spots along that same path that sport lovely little vignettes of flowers, little scenes of clover and daisies and wild roses, which are just heavenly right now. Yellow rattle and Queen Anne's lace, all almost as if they were arranged by somebody with a masterly eye for arranging. I look at it and I think, how can that just have happened spontaneously? But this is the nature of the natural world, which also is part of our own nature. The nature of our life and practice sometimes goes along with long stretches of empty ground. And other times it just spontaneously puts forward a beautiful garden. So many dimensions and such variability, even in the midst of the same old patterns of our daily life. We just finished a workaday sesshin this week, where we had the opportunity to really pay attention just to our daily round. There was nothing extraordinary going on, we would meet early in the morning for a golden hour of Zazen, and then go into our daily routine, and then rejoin each other's company for practice from 6 to 9 in the evening. Dharma talks and a lot of meditation. And just in this very regular, simple schedule, there was so much variability. So I think of our daily practice of Zazen as level ground practice. But even with level ground practice, there are dips and rises, days that we don't really want to interrupt our activities in order to stop and transition to Zazen stillness. Although maybe you've never had that experience, I certainly have. Sometimes it's really hard just to stop and sit, to allow thinking to quiet down and maybe even stop altogether. And be content, at ease, and thoroughly involved in awareness beyond thought, beyond thoughts and habits and reactions. And other days, our level ground Zazen is so welcome. That feeling of taking refuge from all of the noise and the demands of being engaged and productive, and gratefully relaxing into silent, still, just being, the simplicity of it, in company with all things. Sometimes it is just so welcome to just give it all up. And you can do that breath, sometimes we say, okay, now when we begin Zazen, just breathe out. I sometimes think of, that's what we naturally do when we're relieved. We go, oh. We drop, and when you do that, you can even feel the bottom of your stomach. Oh. Which is exactly the full release of breath in Zazen. So everyone's path is unique, and yet we have all experienced that first sit, that very first time we sat, on that first time that we heard Dharma talk, or we read our first book about Zen. That's at the very beginning. There's a recognition when we come across it of something really authentic here that draws us in, even if we can't quite put our finger on what it is. In this world of infinite descriptions of reality and spiritual life, we long to find an anchor somewhere that doesn't require us to subscribe to a something beyond what we directly experience. Relief without surrendering to something that is not us. Even though basically, when we think about awakening, that's exactly what we're doing. We're surrendering to what is beyond us. But the path is through. The path is through our own self system. In Zen, we have a particular relationship to faith. Faith in our own ability to look to our own nature, to be whole just as we are. And what challenges us about this is if, that feeling like, if I am whole, then why am I so unhappy? Or why do I feel so lost? Or how can I be whole coming from the family that I do? That's a common one. Or what should I do with my life that feels worthwhile? What should I do with my aging that feels worthwhile? There are lots of variations on these questions. But you get the idea. We don't go forward without really genuine questions, earnest questions. In most of the koans, they begin with, a monk asks the master in all sincerity, And that's right. We come with like, yeah, I'm serious. This really needs to come forward for me. This really needs to get me somewhere that I long to be, which of course we discover over time is right here. I long to be right here, but I just can't stop my mind long enough to be present. I think I have to stop my mind in order to be right here and present. I mean, there's so much to discover that's just right here. So what are the questions that bring you to Dharma practice? This is our first koan. We live into it with sincere intention to carefully investigate. It really matters to us. And when we encounter Zen, we get a whiff. We hear, not everybody, this doesn't happen for everybody, but we get a whiff of the scent of what we're looking for, a whiff, a taste that's familiar from somewhere, but where? Where do I know this flavor? Where do I know this taste from? What does this remind me of? Choktung Yeshe Dorje wrote, I saw a bird fly through the sky. Never again could my mind be content with less than freedom. You know, next time you see a bird, hop on its back as it wings along in the sky. Share that freedom. I saw I don't know what it was, maybe it was a hawk. It was really high up. And it was absolutely holding still where it was. Its wings were out and it was just probably riding, perched on top of some kind of upswept current. And it was just completely still there. And then after a while, it veered off. And when it veered off, it looked like it probably felt really good. So we come across Zen and we begin a daily practice. Or maybe we don't, or we just begin an intermittent practice, meditating when we feel like it and forgetting about it for periods of time. Anybody here ever had that experience? You just forget about it. You just forget about it. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot all about my Zen practice. This can be a pattern for a while, even years of practice, or intermittently in practice. And I say that's not a problem. It's lovely to have a steady practice. And some people begin and never, ever miss a day. And then others forget and then come back to it. It's just our path. It's the pattern, the seasons. I know many people who've practiced intermittently for years. And the thing is, they never move past or beyond level ground. Being comfortable enough. And that's okay, but it doesn't fully tap into the possibilities of Zen practice. So being comfortable enough until the shit hits the fan, as it will, usually. A divorce, a death, a diagnosis, a job loss. There's endless shit that can do it. Or maybe even something rather minor can jolt us into more serious constancy in our practice. For instance, like having a particularly vivid dream that really either really frightens us or else inspires you and reminds you of awakening. You know, a vast freedom to love and be intimate. A dream perhaps of finding yourself in some strange city and meeting a being of light. And you wake up and you think, wow, that was a being of light in the dream, but it fully infused, I know the feeling. It reminds us of the freedom and the expanse and the extraordinary lightness that comes when we are released from the holding pattern of a small self. So whatever it is, you find yourself in a whole new relationship to the practice, and you get down and you really get interested. The mind beyond knowing is activated. And this can even just happen in a Zazen Kai, a one-day retreat. I mean, you never know when something is going to kind of click. Or some people say, I don't know, for years I intended to do Zen, and then one day came and I just knew it was time. So whatever it is. Zen Master Son Sanim, a great Korean character and Zen master, who wrote a great book called The Compass of Zen. If you haven't read it, it's entertaining. He was very entertaining, very energetic. You began your practice every day with 108 full bows within 15 minutes. You had to do it really fast. Anyway, he said, he coined the phrase "don't know mind" to refer to the deep realization of the limits to thinking, the thinking, knowing mind, when we come across a mind that does not know. An expert mind, Suzuki Roshi comments on this. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. We can get, the mind that knows can get very, very limited and inflexible and filled with suffering. And when we come across an experience like this of don't know mind, it's not only intriguing, but it's potentially also very disturbing. It can be really disconcerting when the familiar ground of knowing all the little walls of the boxes suddenly aren't there. And this can stir up not only insecurity, but with this insecurity, old ways of coping with it. Like the inner critic really gets stirred up because it's about to lose its job. And the inner critic keeps the walls in place. Or we can project it out and find ourselves really being critical of others. Because we've been walking around as a self that knows, and suddenly we don't know. We can't get our bearings. And this is one way it can feel. There's another way, which is that it can leave us with a certain sense of relief. If we spent our lives with the self, that small, restrictive self in the center, a self who always has to know, who has to accomplish and control and be praised, be safe, trying to be on top of everything and take care of everything, then permission to acknowledge don't know mind can be a great relief. What's the problem with not knowing? What happens if I don't know? Oh, what a relief. I don't know, that's the truth. And so what? I can look into the matter. So this is a shift of view and a new season in practice. It's how we relate to practice really changes, because now we have room to explore far more fully our own inner world, our own inner processes, what makes up our experience. Insight is no longer hitched to an iron will, willful zazen that has to guard an ideal self This image is no longer necessary, where we strain and struggle to understand and be enlightened and be able to show that we are. That always comes along with it. We have to let other people see how enlightened we are. So don't know mind allows us to fail. Once this is okay, we are free to explore like a child. When a child has to keep their eye on a constantly disapproving parent or a parent who's really anxious, their ability to explore the world for themselves is limited. And this can set up a lifelong pattern of constraint and inflexibility. But if a child is allowed to explore and the parent keeps their parental eye on safety issues and teaches these without a lot of anxiety to the child, then the child comes into their life with a sense of trusting their own explorations to show them how things work, how the world is, and to have confidence in their ability to cope with their life. They learn to trust themselves and their own experience. And this is the basis of great faith that comes with our practice over time. No one else can grant it to us. We come to this for ourselves through our own practice, our own experience of not knowing, as it supports our deepening presence in the world, as it opens to a much more intimate way of being in the world, just as it is. You think of somebody you love, you just really want to know, what are you thinking, or how do you feel about that? Or you're really open, you're interested. And it helps us know who we are. We look into the causes and the conditions of our life, into everything that makes up what we think is ourself. I mean, really everything, when things don't go the way we want them to, all that is it's just showing us that we had some idea that isn't real. The way the world makes up the self. And maybe we're disappointed. All right, that's what that feels like. But it's not a tragedy. So we get to know who we are and how we put together this self, this identity, this thing that we're so identified with. Again, Suzuki Roshi, Shunryu Suzuki says, what we call I, capital I, is just a swinging door which moves when we inhale and when we exhale. Now that's a description we can all test out for ourselves to see, is that so? Is that so? Is that my experience? Well, check it out. That's what we do. We say, okay, now we're going to do Zazen. Breathing out. I know that I am breathing out. Breathing in. I know that I'm breathing in. I'm present to the breath in the body. So what season is this in practice? Well, how we answer that is ours to see. We look at our own relationship. What season is this? I might say the red-winged blackbird lands on a new cattail in the swollen marsh, and the honeysuckle perfumes the night air. How would you say what season this is? So we continue to practice with Don't Know Mind as our path onward, always going beyond. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. Going beyond, always going beyond. This very heart mind, this very moment. Hallelujah. First, we have experiences that reveal the oneness of life, It's one of the teachings we need to check out. In what ways is all of life one? What is the oneness of these teachings? What do I know of it? How is this expressed right here and now? How does this moment come forward as one whole, all together, nothing getting in anything else's way? This profound, interpenetrating functioning of the present moment. But then there's also another step, investigating and clarifying how even in oneness, we are unique. Differentiating without dividing up the world. Seeing the 10,000 things as our own body. Diversity without division. Atom by atom. The world is made of constantly flowing combinations and recombinations of atoms. Infinite. An infinity of causes, an infinity of conditions. What do you know of this in your own experience? So really the direction we're always going is from knowing to not knowing. There's nothing wrong with knowing. There are a lot of things to know. Hopefully by this time in our lives, we know a lot of things. We need to function. But then not knowing, appreciating not knowing, being able to remember not knowing, allow for it, and be guided by it. To rest into not knowing, which then leads us into appreciating and wonder. This moment, this atom, always flowing into ever going beyond this. This is our practice. This is our life. And these are the seasons that come around and around. Thank you.